My name is Lena Whitmore, and I have always been the quiet sister. Ever since childhood, my role in our family was to blend into the background, smoothing over conflicts and making sure no one felt uncomfortable. I was the peacekeeper, the mediator, and often the invisible provider, while my younger sister, Bella, blossomed into the center of attention with her vibrant laughter and magnetic charm. I was praised quietly in private, steady, responsible, reliable. My parents loved Bella openly, joyfully, proudly. With me, their affection was always quieter, more cautious, almost apologetic, as if my steadiness was compensation enough for their subtle neglect. There was an unspoken rule in our home. Bella was the bright one destined to shine, while I was the shadow beneath her feet, necessary but unnoticed. No one ever directly told me this, yet I felt it deeply, a truth whispered in glances and hesitant smiles. Whenever trouble arose, broken curfews, failing grades, impulsive arguments, I was called upon to smooth things over, to cover costs, to ease tensions with my calm presence and open wallet. My parents never outright asked, they simply expected. Bella never thanked me. She assumed I'd always be there to catch her. And for so long, I convinced myself that family meant quietly giving, generously supporting, without expecting acknowledgement or praise. My silence and compliance became the foundation on which our family balanced, precariously yet firmly. I accepted this as love, unaware of the quiet resentment growing inside me, nurtured by years of unnoticed sacrifices and small, invisible wounds. I never imagined that beneath my gentle smiles and supportive nods, something was slowly breaking. I was the stable one, after all, the sister everyone could count on to stay calm, pay the bills, and quietly hold everything together. When Bella burst through our parents' front door one evening, eyes sparkling and cheeks flushed, announcing she was engaged, the room exploded in a chaos of joyful celebration. My parents embraced her tightly, laughing and shedding happy tears. I stood quietly off to the side, smiling politely and waiting my turn, always waiting my turn. Eventually, Bella turned toward me, her hand outstretched, the glittering diamond on her finger catching the soft lamplight. I stepped forward dutifully, offered my congratulations, and hugged her gently, as always careful not to overshadow her big moment. In the weeks that followed, wedding planning consumed our family. My parents excitedly pored over venues, dresses, guest lists, and menus. Bella relished every bit of attention, calling late at night to share ideas and updates, each phone call an endless loop of excitement that I listened to patiently. My mother, in her characteristic gentle tone, asked me privately to handle the practicalities, to quietly secure the details that Bella found tedious: deposits, contracts, and logistics. You're the stable one, she reminded me softly, touching my arm lightly, a quiet request masked as appreciation. And because it was expected, I took on the responsibilities without complaint. I paid the catering deposit, signed off on the flower arrangements, and quietly covered the dress alterations, each swipe of my credit card further cementing my role as the hidden support beneath Bella's spotlight. And no one ever asked if I minded. No one noticed that my enthusiasm wasn't quite genuine, that behind my quiet smiles and careful nods, a growing ache of loneliness had begun to spread. I reassured myself that family meant sacrifice. Love meant generosity without keeping tabs. But deep down, an uncomfortable truth began whispering that perhaps I was valued more for what I could give than for who I truly was. As the wedding drew closer, I felt the subtle shift that often precedes a breaking point, like the quiet crackling of thin ice beneath careful footsteps. At first, it was small things, easily dismissed but lingering nonetheless. Bella and Nathan would have planning dinners and somehow forget to invite me. When they shared updates with family friends, I was casually omitted from stories, reduced to an invisible benefactor whose name no one remembered to say out loud. Then came the subtle digs, cloaked in kindness but sharp enough to wound. Nathan's quiet smirk whenever I tried to offer an opinion, Bella's casual wave of dismissal. "Oh, Lena, you wouldn't really get it. They giggled softly at inside jokes, exchanging glances heavy with private meanings. Each moment built upon the last, leaving me increasingly excluded from the very event I was quietly holding together. Still, I tried to convince myself it wasn't intentional. Maybe they were stressed. Perhaps my quiet nature just made it easy to forget about me. I told myself these things because confronting the truth that my family saw me as dispensable hurt too deeply. I continued silently fulfilling my role, reassuring myself that keeping peace was worth swallowing the quiet insults. But one afternoon, I overheard Bella talking to our mother, her voice thin with exasperation. "Lena's always hovering," she complained, unaware I was just beyond the doorway. "It's my wedding, Mom. I don't know why she needs to be so involved." The sting of those words settled into my chest, aching sharply as the realization finally sank in. Bella genuinely didn't want me there. My careful efforts and hidden sacrifices had only made me a burden, a shadow she wished would disappear. Quietly, I stepped away, my presence unnoticed, the ache in my chest deepening into something heavier, darker, a pain impossible to ignore. On the morning of the wedding, I woke early, heart heavy yet hopeful. I dressed quietly in a soft blue dress, simple but carefully chosen. As I smoothed the fabric, I reminded myself that today was about family, about showing up despite the quiet wounds I'd carried for so long. Even if they hadn't acknowledged me, I'd still be there, offering my quiet support from the sidelines as always. When I arrived, the venue was buzzing with last-minute preparations. Florists arranged blossoms I'd ordered, musicians tuned instruments, whose fees I'd paid, and caterers prepared dishes carefully selected months earlier. I stood quietly near the front row, observing the elegant chaos I'd quietly funded. For a moment, pride warmed me, knowing I'd helped create something beautiful, even if my family never fully acknowledged my part in it. Then Nathan appeared, walking toward me with a purposeful stride. His eyes held none of the warmth typically expected on a day like this. Instead, he wore an expression chilling in its calmness. He straightened his tie, looked me directly in the eyes, and said quietly yet firmly, "This day is for real family only. Bella doesn't want you here." I stood frozen, the words slowly penetrating my shock. "You want me to leave?" I whispered, disbelief coating my voice. He offered a thin, almost polite smile. "She does." My throat tightened and I felt a flush of humiliation and pain flood through me, hot and sharp. I looked around, hoping anyone had overheard, might intervene or protest. But everyone was busy, lost in their own conversations, oblivious to my quiet devastation. I didn't argue or plead. I simply nodded, dignity holding me upright despite the heaviness in my heart. Without a word, I turned to leave, realizing for the first time that the family I'd quietly supported for years had no trouble erasing me from their biggest moment. As I walked slowly to my car, my heels clicking softly against the pavement, a strange clarity settled over me. It was as though years of hidden hurts and silent frustrations had finally broken through, leaving me exposed but undeniably awake. All the quiet whispers of pain, all the carefully overlooked slights, now echoed vividly in my mind, and I saw clearly the pattern of my life. Always giving, always silent, always left behind. Sitting alone in my car, fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly, I tried to breathe through the ache in my chest. Anger rose in quiet waves, unfamiliar yet strangely empowering. It surprised me, the strength of it, the steady pulse beneath my pain. For once, I didn't push it away. Instead, I let it fill me, reminding myself I deserved better than to be quietly erased. Instinctively, I picked up my phone, my hand shaking slightly but determined. The number for the venue was still at the top of my recent calls. Every reservation, every payment, every single detail was tied to my name, my signature, my quiet generosity. In that moment, I realized I held more power than anyone had ever acknowledged. My presence had been optional, but my contributions were essential. The phone rang twice before a familiar, cheerful voice answered, oblivious to the turmoil that had just unfolded. Calmly, almost gently, I spoke the words I'd never imagined saying aloud. I need to cancel everything immediately. There was a brief pause, surprise evident in her voice. Everything? She confirmed hesitantly. Yes, I whispered, voice steady despite the tremor in my hand. The catering, flowers, musicians, all of it. It's under my name. Please cancel immediately. As I ended the call, a strange mixture of relief and sorrow filled me. They had erased me from their lives, so I quietly removed the only thing they'd forgotten was holding their perfect day together. Later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance what happened after I left. Guests had arrived at the venue dressed beautifully, chatting excitedly, only to find the ballroom locked and silent. Confusion soon turned into whispers, then complaints, as they stood outside in clusters, checking watches, shifting uneasily. My parents, flustered and embarrassed, frantically searched for answers, calling vendors who calmly explained the truth. Everything had been cancelled by me, the invisible daughter they'd quietly relied upon. Bella's reaction, I was told, had been explosive. Her usually sweet demeanor crumbled into loud accusations and furious tears. Nathan, who had coldly delivered my dismissal, stood awkwardly by her side, face tight with barely concealed frustration. My mother, always gentle, was mortified by the spectacle. My father paced anxiously, attempting damage control, while the guests watched this unexpected drama unfold, their faces reflecting shock, sympathy, and silent judgment. When someone finally thought to bring sandwiches hastily bought from a nearby store, it felt like a pitiful attempt to salvage dignity. The elegance I'd quietly financed reduced to cold convenience store platters spread on a picnic table. Bella, who had envisioned a flawless day, wept bitterly, blaming everyone but herself, screaming that I'd betrayed her, that I'd ruined everything out of jealousy and spite. But the truth was quieter and far more painful. It wasn't spite or envy that had driven me to that quiet act of rebellion. It was the sudden, aching realization that I'd spent years giving without recognition or respect, silently supporting a family who saw me as disposable. The fallout was loud and dramatic, a public spectacle of betrayal that would be whispered about for years, but at its heart lay a quiet, unseen truth. I hadn't betrayed them. I'd finally chosen myself. In the days following the wedding, my phone buzzed relentlessly, vibrating with a stream of angry texts and missed calls. Messages from my mother came first, pleading, gently reproachful, asking how I could do something so hurtful. Bella's texts were sharp and bitter, laced with accusations, as if I'd single-handedly destroyed her entire life. My father said nothing at first, which hurt in its own quiet way. When he finally sent a message, it was brief and stark, expressing profound disappointment. Cutting deeper than any angry accusation, I read each message carefully, absorbing the weight of their anger, letting their disappointment seep through my veins. It hurt profoundly. Yet beneath the initial wave of guilt, a strange calmness emerged. For the first time, I resisted the urge to respond, to justify or apologize. Instead, I simply let the messages sit unanswered, glowing quietly on the screen, a testimony to the gap between who they thought I was and who I was becoming. Days turned into weeks. The anger gradually gave way to silence, a harsh and lonely quiet that at times felt heavier than their accusations. But within that stillness, something important shifted in me. I began to breathe easier, free of the weight of unspoken expectations. My quiet apartment, once a reminder of loneliness, became a sanctuary, a space where I could finally hear my own voice clearly. Occasionally, mutual friends reached out, careful and curious, wondering about my side of the story. Yet I refused to explain myself, knowing any attempt to justify my actions would be met with disbelief or pity. Instead, I lived quietly and firmly, moving forward into a future that felt uncertain yet entirely mine. In the silence of my solitude, I learned something vital. Sometimes the bravest response isn't loud or defiant, but the quiet resolve to no longer let others define your worth. In the months that followed, I watched from a distance as my family quietly reshaped the story. Bella took to social media, crafting posts carefully constructed to portray herself as the innocent victim of a jealous, spiteful sister. My parents, perhaps out of embarrassment or a need to maintain their dignity, subtly reinforced this narrative, murmuring quietly to friends about how I'd had an emotional breakdown, how they'd always worried about my stability beneath my calm exterior. I read their words and heard the whispers, feeling the quiet ache of betrayal deepen, knowing the truth had become irrelevant in the face of a more convenient fiction. It stung profoundly to realize they preferred the image of a quietly resentful sister rather than confront the uncomfortable truth of their own neglect and my silent suffering. Yet, surprisingly, I found myself unwilling to publicly defend my actions. Fighting back, I realized, would only pull me deeper into their cycle of accusations and denial. Instead, I quietly collected screenshots and messages, preserving the reality of what had happened, not to prove anything to the world but to remind myself of the courage it had taken to walk away. Slowly, I withdrew from the noise of their drama, immersing myself instead in my own life. I began writing privately, recording memories, reflections, and quiet revelations, recognizing the strength it took to let others misunderstand me. In sharing selectively, I found new friendships, gentle bonds with people who valued my voice without needing explanations. Though my family had rewritten history, painting me as the villain, I discovered quiet empowerment in simply living my truth. They could shape the story however they liked, but I no longer needed their approval or understanding. For the first time, my silence was no longer submission, it was quiet strength, choosing peace and dignity over validation from those who never truly saw me. Life changed quietly, steadily, in ways I hadn't expected. After a while, I stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for explanations or apologies that would never come. Instead, I filled my days with simple pleasures, writing in the early mornings, sipping coffee as sunlight gently filled my quiet kitchen. New friendships blossomed naturally, free from old family shadows. Each small interaction felt genuine, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. I began to travel, cautiously at first, then boldly, discovering parts of myself I'd long neglected. The freedom felt strange yet invigorating, no longer held captive by the quiet resentment or expectations of others. Slowly, I realized I was no longer merely surviving, but thriving. For the first time, happiness felt effortless, not something carefully constructed around the feelings of others. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of my family's life through distant acquaintances or social media. Bella's carefully curated smiles, the illusion of perfection still maintained, but I no longer felt the sharp sting of exclusion. Instead, I felt quiet relief and a kind of gentle pity. The perfect image they clung to had caused them something authentic and real, the quiet bonds of trust and kindness that once could have connected us. My new life was modest but profoundly satisfying. I started a small business, sharing stories online, building a community of people who connected through honesty rather than pretense. Quietly, steadily, my voice grew stronger, my confidence deepening each day. I found peace not in the absence of pain, but in knowing I had chosen myself, quietly and firmly, even when it had felt impossible. The quiet sister, once invisible, had finally become visible to herself. And within that quiet visibility, I discovered something truly priceless, a sense of worth that no one could erase. Nearly 2 years after Bella's wedding, I received an unexpected message from my mother. The words were hesitant, careful, and quietly pleading. Bella was struggling. Nathan, the man who'd once looked me straight in the eyes and told me to leave, had proven unfaithful. Their marriage, built on appearances rather than honesty, was crumbling, and Bella was inconsolable. My parents, now overwhelmed, needed help. Once again, they quietly looked to me, expecting my stability to hold them all upright. As I read the message, memories flooded back. The quiet pain, the humiliation, the steady ache of betrayal. But beneath these familiar hurts was something new, a quiet resolve, an unshakable strength I'd earned through careful healing and rebuilding. For a moment, my old instincts surfaced, urging me to rescue them, to step back into my old role as the silent fixer. Yet, in that quiet moment, clarity crystallized. I saw the truth clearly. They'd only reached out when they needed something, when their careful illusion faltered. My presence had always been conditional, tied to what I could quietly provide, never truly valued for myself. And finally, quietly, but firmly, I knew I couldn't return to that life. Instead, I took a deep breath, my heart steady, my fingers calm as I replied with just one sentence, gentle but clear. This time, I choose me. Sending those words brought unexpected tears, relief mingled with grief, strength intertwined with loss. But beneath it all was a quiet sense of peace, a deep, empowering awareness that I'd broken free from their quiet hold. They had erased me once, but I had reclaimed myself. And as I moved forward, leaving old wounds gently behind, I knew my story was finally, entirely my own.